Welcome to Asia in Review. Our program this evening, or today, depending on when you're watching this, is entitled Afghanistan and Pakistan, Crisis States Now Dwarfed by Syria. We're going to be exploring a lot of issues today that have to do with the Middle East, but concentrating on Afghanistan and Pakistan. And to do that, we have a special guest in our audience, someone who has enormous depth with respect to not only these two countries, but the Middle East generally. Our guest here is Dr. Abdul-Karim Khan. And Dr. Khan is a professor at Leeward Community College. And Karim, nice to have you with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
You know, the first time I ever heard you speak, you were talking about politics and history involving Afghanistan.
Yes.
And I sat there just transfixed by the complexity and of the whole situation and knowledge. And I was thinking about this, my transfixion, if you will, with your presentation. In recent days, we've seen this rather weak attention span that Washington has on various countries in the world that are troubled, shifting in the Middle East from Libya to Egypt, and then on to now on to Syria. And one of the things that I think is that you could really help our audience with is you have tremendous depth and knowledge of both Pakistan and Afghanistan. And that's because you were born and raised in Peshawar.
Right.
Help me with the pronunciation.
Peshawar.
Peshawar, Pakistan. And so, Mr. Producer, if we can show our audience the map here, so we get, I want to show the folks the hometown, if you will, of
right.
Karim, right there, close to the border of Afghanistan.
Yes.
And it's in this area called the tribal area.
Is that? Yeah. So it's the Pashtun land.
Pashtuns.
Yeah, between Kabul and Peshawar. So you have one ethnic group called the Pashtuns, and unfortunately, for the past 30 years, it's a constant warfare in the area, which makes it very difficult. So between Kabul and Peshawar, all sorts of trouble you can have.
And you were not simply just born as a little kid in Peshawar. You grew up and lived there and was educated and left there in your mid-30s. So
yes.
You have a very unique feel for this region of the world.
And it's my home. That's one place. I mean, a place that I know well. And then if you are in Peshawar, then you are exposed to a lot of other cultures, Iranian, Afghanis. Also, for the past 30 years, we had, about 5 million Afghan refugees in that one province, the northwestern frontier province, which is now called the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa.
So that is, if we can have the map back one more time, Mr. Producer, the area that you grew up in is right near the border.
Right near the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan.
And that is the famous, you pronounce it Khyber Pass.
Yeah, the Khyber Pass.
And
yes.
And I learned it incorrectly as the Khyber Pass, but that's,
which is fine. Khyber Pass or Khyber Pass.
But the important point that I want to make here is this border area is very fluid, is it not?
Very fluid, very porous. And, people with means and with reasons to go across the border, they do it daily, almost, without any passport, without any visa. And because the same culture, Pashtuns living on both sides of the border in Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Oh, almost, the border is almost irrelevant. Almost.
For a lot of people, yes.
Okay.
However, if you are an official from Pakistan, you better go with a passport. And so if you are an official in Afghanistan, you better come to Pakistan with a passport.
Okay.
Just in case somebody kidnaps you, they will track you.
And And you still have brother and sister and family
yes.
in
extended
Peshawar?
family. My brother and sister, they're there. My wife and children right now here. But my two daughters, they're now almost settled in Peshawar. One married in Peshawar, so she's there. And another one goes to Peshawar Medical College. So she is in the 4th year of medical college. And so hopefully within 2 years she will be back to Hawaii. To Paradise when she finishes her degree.
Interesting.
Yes.
Well, let's take kind of drop into this conversation a little bit into the area of the situation involving the Karzai government and Afghanistan. Now, Afghanistan has been off of the media radar for many months now.
True.
And so we're now in the fall. And how would you describe the situation in Afghanistan today with the Karzai government and the American withdrawal?
In fact, this will not be the second time that Afghanistan would be dropped for something that goes on in the Middle East. If you remember, Afghanistan was dropped for Iraq.
Dropped for Iraq and dropped for the Arab Spring, as I recall.
And the Arab Spring, not so much for the Arab Spring, but originally for Iraq and now for Syria. You know, all attention is focused on Syria. But interestingly, Syria stole the show from Iran. And so the original thinking or the worry on part of the people in the region was that as soon as the US forces get out of Afghanistan, that would be maybe within 4 or 5 months, United States and Israel would be bombing the Iranian nuclear installations. If there is no, agreement between Iran or United Nations that would be acceptable to Israel and United States.
So what you're saying is that with the withdrawal of American forces,
yes,
that the crosshairs of the target
would be Iran.
Would be Iran.
And so, in the meantime, Syria stole that show, but the Syrian, problem is ongoing for 2 years.
Sure.
And it was the chemical weapons, alleged use by the Syrian government of Bashar Assad that stole the show and made the United States to jump into the problem in the civil war in Syria. Although it's not going to get involved in the civil war in Syria, but at the same time, you never know.
You never know. And,
yes.
And one of the things that I find fascinating about your background is that when you were a young man and growing up, you're basically on the Pakistani border,
yes,
looking into Afghanistan at another time of occupation by the Soviet during
Union.
The 1980s.
Exactly, 1979, starting from 1979 to 1988. For the 10 years that war was going on, and we suffered in a lot of ways. So the 10-year Afghan jihad, funded by the United States, by the way, starting with the Carter administration and then with the Reagan administration. And so that 10 years war also, did a lot of damage. The Afghan jihad, so to speak, against Soviet Union. And the moment the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan, 1988, that is the time when the downfall of Soviet Union started. Because the theory was that in the Eastern Bloc countries at that time, and even in Central Asia, like all these Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, the stands. And so these guys, the Eastern Bloc people, they believed that if the Afghans could beat, and remember this was the first Soviet defeat, after Second World War.
That's right.
The first Soviet defeat, the first Soviet withdrawal from any country. Because the Soviets were known for going in Yugoslavia, staying there, Czechoslovakia, staying there, never withdrew. But this was the first time.
Right.
They withdrew in big number. The first time after Second World War that in thousands, we don't have the figures, but in thousands the Soviets were killed in Afghanistan. And the reason was simple, because United States wanted to turn Afghanistan into Vietnam for the Soviets. And they did it, and did it very successfully.
And so that, so what you're saying, if I'm following you correctly, is that gave a lot of muscle to the countries of Eastern Europe,
Right.
as stands and so forth.
Exactly. And so the idea there was that if the Afghans could beat the Soviets, they could do it too. And so even though the process in Poland had already started, anti-Soviet, grumbling and then demonstration even with the heroes of Gdansk, Les Walecha, in Poland.
In Poland, right.
Remember, so they had already started the movement, but this was sort of a push. And then in Central Asia also they wanted freedom. So if Afghanistan could be free after 10 years of, real hard and hot war, if Afghanistan could, the people of Afghanistan could free themselves from Soviet occupation, the rest of the Eastern Bloc and Central Asia could do that too. And so that triggered, in a way, the downfall of Soviet Union.
It's sort of like the Soviet Union's domino theory. If
Exactly. Yes.
And it worked.
It worked.
Okay.
It worked. And beginning from the Bush administration, what happened was that the moment any Baltic state, Lithuania, Estonia, the moment they declared themselves free from Soviet Union, that very moment here, Washington was the first, thanks to George Bush the first.
All right.
41.
All right. Let's go back to the original question here now, with that as background.
Yeah.
What's the situation on the ground today with the Karzai government and Afghanistan being prepared for an American withdrawal? What is it really like?
Before I come to this, I have to tell you one more thing. The 10-year warfare, the Afghan jihad, supported by United States against Soviet Union, it created a lot of problem for both Pakistan and Afghanistan.
In what way?
Number one, it pumped a huge, big weaponry in the region.
Okay.
To the extent of Stinger missiles.
All right.
Huge, big weaponry that United States and Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar gave, to the Afghan Mujahideen. So that weaponry never, it improved. It never died down, with the passage of time. And so no sooner the Soviets went out of Afghanistan, they started a civil war among the Afghans. So coming back to when the American would leave, and this is now the dominant, question. When the American leave, will there be a civil war?
And the groups fighting would be?
The groups fighting would be Taliban number one.
Taliban?
In the south, the Pashtun group.
Pashtun?
Yeah, mostly Pashtun.
That's your group.
That's my group. Yes, but I had to explain to someone that, thank God, not all Pashtuns are Taliban, and so one of my faculty member, a good friend of mine, this past Ramadan, the fasting month, I grew beard.
Okay.
And so when he first saw me, he said, "Karim, what's going on with you? Is it the Taliban or something else?" I said, "No, it's just a midlife crisis." So don't worry about me. And so in that place, what you have is, Taliban, almost all Taliban are Pashtun, but not all Pashtuns are Taliban.
Okay.
And so the Taliban, supported by their own Pashtuns within Kandahar Valley and Helmand, the hotbed of the resistance in Afghanistan. Now, the problem is, on the Pakistani side, there are also Taliban. And now they have sort of regularized their organization and known for the past, I believe, 10 years as the Pakistani Taliban. So,
and they walk back and forth across that,
yes,
move across that porous border, no problem.
But the thing is, it's also a fallacy on part of common people here in this country, that is the anti-American warfare of the Taliban inside Afghanistan is fed more from Pakistan, which is not true. There is support, there is a mechanism inside Pakistan, especially in Waziristan, where you have the largest drone attacks inside Pakistan. There are bases inside Pakistan, but the real fighting is done by the Afghan Taliban. And the Pakistani Taliban are very much engaged by the Pakistan army. Now
Okay.
keep in mind.
Hold on now. We're
Okay.
just about coming to a break.
Okay.
We'll come back in a moment here. You're watching or listening to Afghanistan and Pakistan crisis states now dwarfed by the situation in Syria with Dr. Abdul-Karim Khan. Stay with us. We'll be back after this short break.
Aloha, this is Jay Fidel. You know, ThinkTech and the Hawaii Venture Capital Association put on monthly luncheon panel programs at the Plaza Club here in Pioneer Plaza. Our program this time is on September 26th. It's called Solar in Hawaii. We're going to examine the solar industry and see what's in it for the long haul. We have a great panel, great moderator. We'll be sending out email on this. If you want to be in our email list to receive the details, check out thinktechhawaii.com. In any event, you can sign up for the program at hvca.org. Thanks. See you there. This is Jay Fidel. Mahalo.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of the Arts in Hawaii on the ThinkTech series. I'm also the managing director of Kumukuhua Theater in beautiful downtown Honolulu at 46 Merchant Street. Right now we have an incredible show running called Will the Real Charlie Chan Please Stand Up? The Charlie Chan was based on a real-life detective right here in Chinatown, and Nancy P. Moss has written a wonderful script that Reiko Ho has done an excellent job of directing. It's running at Kumukuhua until September 22nd. You can find more information at kumukuhua.org. I hope to see you there. Aloha. Hi.
We're back. This is Asian Review. I'm your host, David Day, and we are joined by the fascinating Dr. Abdul-Karim Khan from Leeward Community College, and if you just joined us, Dr. Khan grew up in Peshawar, Pakistan, has family there, and is an expert on Middle Eastern and Islamic history, among other things. And one of the things that fascinates me about Dr. Khan is his depth of knowledge in this particular region of the world. And right before the break, Karim, we were talking about the differences between the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistani Taliban.
Right.
And you were saying?
Both are Pashtuns. Both help each other, no question about that. The Afghan Taliban are much more fixated.
Let me interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, just in case you just joined us, our guest is a Pashtun, but
Yes.
he's not Taliban.
No.
So, all right. All right. I just had to put that in there so that
But-
there's no confusion. We don't want to get...
Yes, but then again, there's a connection. And the connection is,
no, wait.
when we say Taliban,
Okay.
this terminology has been misused and abused. Taliban simply means the seekers of knowledge of the religious education.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Taliban, it's the derivative from Talibul Ilm, Persian and Arabic, meaning the seeker of knowledge. And most of them, they seek religious knowledge. Now, when I was growing up, they study in religious schools, which are called the madrasas. You must have heard about them.
Madrasas.
Madrasas. These are Islamic religious schools. And so almost, 3, 4, 5 villages, they would have one madrasa. So they send their children there, and some villages, those who can afford, they have their own madrasa. So in our village, there was a madrasa, and I did attend. And so when you grow up, most children, they go to the local masjid, the local mosque, and almost every, well-to-do mosque would have their own madrasa. And so in a way, when I was growing up at the age of, 14, 15, 12.
I could see it's coming. It's
yes.
coming.
So I could be very well called Talib. Talib, the singular of Taliban.
Okay.
Taliban plural, and the singular is Talib. So sitting among the Taliban, I could be one of them. Back in 1960s and 70s.
Okay, I'm not worried.
Yeah. So this Taliban thing, this new terminology, that was the creation of late 80s during anti-jihad, and especially after when the Soviets left the Taliban movement, they rose, and this was a group of religious students who came to their religious scholar, Mullah Omar, who had fought against the Soviets and now he was retired.
Okay.
But then a group of people came, especially they say women, it's a legend, but very popular. A woman came to this religious mullah, cleric, to help her rescue her daughter, who had been kidnapped by a warlord in Afghanistan. And reluctantly, he said, okay, he would do that. And in that culture, when a woman comes to you and seeks your help, then culturally, in the Pashtun culture, which is called Pashtun Wali, the code of the Pashtuns, then whether you can do it or not, you're going to do it.
You're going to do it.
Yes. And so he gathered his students, Taliban,
Okay.
who had nothing to do with the United States or anybody else. And so he said, you know, what's the use of reading all these religious books? The Quran and Hadith, if we cannot get that one innocent young woman released from the clutches of this warlord. So they went after that warlord.
So this is the history of the beginning,
The beginning of the rise of
Taliban.
Taliban. Exactly. They were not political people, just, you know, common students.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And so they went after this one warlord and grabbed him in his house and got the woman
Okay.
released and hanged that warlord, who nobody could touch him. He was so powerful. And then people, you know, they were very buoyed and begged them to, you know, go to this after another warlord. And that is how this push started.
Okay.
The Taliban rose against these different warlords, and that is how they got rid of the country. But then, you know, they started a political civil war between the Taliban and the former Mujahideen leaders in Kabul.
Okay. And if we fast forward this tape now,
And now we're coming to Pakistan.
no, before we get to Pakistan,
Yeah.
I just want you to kind of give our audience a kind of a picture, because Afghanistan has been off the radar for several months.
Yes.
What is the situation like now?
Right now, most Afghan intellectuals, lawmakers, merchants, thinkers, they are just seized by one question.
What's that?
What is going to happen to them after the Americans leave at the end of 1914 next year?
Okay, so let's talk about that for a moment,
Yes.
because I have heard it say that maybe we're going to see a fall of Kabul like we saw the fall of Saigon, and how do you picture things
No, it
working
won't
out?
be. It will not be the fall of Saigon-like situation in Kabul. In Kabul, in Afghanistan, the Americans have so far trained thousands of Afghan soldiers in the Afghan army, called ANA, the
Okay,
Afghan
right.
National Army.
Right.
And the hope is that these soldiers, Afghan soldiers, would stand up to the expected onslaught of the Taliban.
Okay, and so Karim,
Yes.
you are a Pashtun.
Yes.
What do you think? Will they? I'm asking you to look into the crystal
Yes.
ball. I know that's difficult. But
Right.
What do you think is going to happen?
Personally, I think it's going to be difficult.
Why is that?
The reason is very simple. The way the Americans, they did not know in the beginning the composition of they had worked with Mujahideen, with the Afghan people, mostly with Pashtuns during this anti-Soviet jihad. But what happened, the way this Afghan army was structured, it does not have the real representative of Afghanistan. It has foot soldiers, the Pashtuns, but at the top it is very non-Pashtun.
Interesting.
Yeah, there are several groups in Afghanistan, ethnic groups. Pashtun is the dominant. The next group would be Tajik, then Uzbek, then Hazara, and then some other smatterings. So the Afghan National Army, unfortunately, was structured. It's very high at the top with non-Pashtun commanding officers. And one reason for that was when I talked to the Schofield Barrack, commanders, the 25th Infantry, when they go, I give them orientation for Afghanistan. And so when they went there, they found like Pashtuns very anti-American, because when the Americans attacked Afghanistan, it was a Pashtun government, the Taliban government that was blew up out of business, And so the American imagined and sort of fancy, they thought that every Pashtun is against United States, which was really not the case. So they filled the top with the Tajik group, the Persian-speaking group.
And that means that the military is not cohesive.
The military is very divided, to say the least, very divided. And then, unfortunately, the way they are paid and fed now, soon after the Americans leave, that type of a monadu is going to stop.
So you see
lack of payment,
lack of
discipline.
Discipline.
Yes, a lot more the army doing the job of the police, which is getting into corruption at the local levels. And that is the greatest opportunity for the Taliban to rise and do damage to this Afghan national army.
Karim, if I could kind of summarize what I think you're saying here, is that your view is that what we are likely to see after the American withdrawal is no promises, but is a type of an implosion back into some kind of a civil war.
God forbid, yes. And the Taliban are very much ready for that, because right now as we speak, this is the third month that Taliban have become more brazen in their attacks inside Kabul, inside Kandahar, inside Helmand.
Does that level of brazenness, is it increasing? Is there a relationship between that and the focus of the U.S. shifting now to Syria?
If not focusing of the shift, at least the downgrading of the U.S. activities before the withdrawal inside Afghanistan. So you cannot leave tomorrow and you fight a big war today.
I understand.
And so the Americans have to draw down. And they already have done that, in the sense the forces have not completely left. Some are already on their way out. But the actual fighting now, the Americans have ceased. It is much more fighting between the Afghan National Army and the Taliban.
So what, in terms of the American withdrawal, no problem with flying out American soldiers.
Yes.
They can be flown out.
They can be flown out.
The challenge is moving equipment. And
yes.
How does the U.S. military move equipment, all that hardware?
Yes.
How do they get that out of Afghanistan?
That's the big problem. And that could be done only via the Khyber Pass.
So that's coming to your hometown?
To my hometown. And you have to pass by that hometown. Peshawar.
What's the problem with that?
Well, the problem is, before you reach to Peshawar, from Kabul, Bagram, Kandahar, Helmand, on the Afghan side, and you reach Peshawar on the Pakistani side, and walk through or drive through the Khyber Pass, that whole area is the Taliban country. And you have to have a very good support of the Pakistan army to stop the Taliban from stopping the convoys, the American hardware getting out of Afghanistan.
So we're going to shift in the next part of the program into to talking about the situation in Pakistan.
Yes.
But before we do that, is it your view that today, with the emphasis and radar shifting off of Afghanistan, that the situation on the ground in Kabul and in Afghanistan is deteriorating?
It is. It is, and don't be surprised to see quite a few number of big landlords, wealthy people, taking out their money, going to the Gulf state. Doha, Dubai, and investing there.
Flight capital.
Yes, flight of capital, yes. That's one. Second thing is, right now as we speak, Afghanistan is also, while it, seized with this worry, what is going to happen after the Americans leave next year. Next year is also very important for Afghanistan.
And we'll talk
that
about...
would be election.
Okay, and we'll talk about that when we come back after the break.
Sure.
Stay with us. This is Asia in Review. I'm your host, David Day, and we're talking about Afghanistan and Pakistan, crisis states now dwarfed by the crisis in Syria, and we'll be back after the break.
We want to thank our underwriters.
Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric on Maui and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve.
Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company.
The High-Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency, attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism.
Castle and Cook Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state.
Hawaii Gas, formerly the gas company, a proponent of the Liquefied Natural Gas Initiative, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future.
Collateral Analytics, a Hawaii-based tech company empowering the real estate industry with greater and faster access to the tools and data they need to make better informed property investment decisions.
I'm Nicole Hori. Thanks so much for joining us on ThinkTech.
I'm Maria Kashem. See you next time.
We're back, and you are watching a ThinkTech global broadcast. This is the show Asia in Review. I'm your host, David Day, and our guest today is Dr. Abdul-Karim Khan, who is a professor with Leeward Community College, an expert on Middle East Islamic history, and is a Pashtun, having grown up, lived, and with family firmly anchored in Peshawar, Pakistan. And right at the break, Karim, we were talking, you just got into the word election coming up.
Yes.
For those viewers who've just joined us, Dr. Khan was talking about kind of a deteriorating situation over the last many months in Afghanistan. Upcoming election,
yes.
President Karzai, is he going to make it?
No, he cannot run.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
he
then
had
what?
his terms complete. And so there has to be someone else. And that someone else has to be blessed by Karzai, who would not be Karzai, but sort of looking like Karzai. And he has to be a Pashtun. The president of Afghanistan has to be a Pashtun.
Okay, well that
it's a sort of an unwritten law.
All right.
Because the dominant ethnic group in that country is Pashtun. And that Pashtun has to be also someone who likes United States.
Interesting. Okay.
And would have to do a lot of, what the United States says, and so he has to listen to United States. Whether United States listen to him or not, that's a different issue. But he has to be better than Karzai. And in the sense that he has to bring the whole nation together. It's a huge, big task.
Any quick question, and we'll move on
Yeah.
off this topic. You know the leaders in Kabul, the potential anointed ones, if you will, for the presidential election. Is there anyone that you can identify that fits that bill?
Very difficult. Just last week there was a big row in Kabul itself because Karzai nominated a person, appointed a person into the High Election Commission. And so that raised the possibility, it's a conspiracy theory, that he is going to postpone the election and rule by sort of executive orders till he finds a reliable man. He cannot bring his brother. One of his brother was killed by the Taliban last year in Kandahar. He could, succeed him, but unfortunately he was assassinated. And so if he is going to bring a Pashtun, he has to be acceptable to the other ethnic groups, the Tajik, the Uzbek, the Hazara, and he has to be a unifier. And Karzai has been in that role. But it's not a person, a president who can unify his own nation. He has to be acceptable to other people outside Afghanistan, to the people or the government of Pakistan, with whom he has to work, with Iran. So Afghanistan shares a huge big border with Pakistan and Iran. And so this has to be a person who is acceptable to Pakistan, and definitely if he can bring together his own country, he will be acceptable to both Iran and Pakistan.
Okay, and you're, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems to me like you're painting a fairly dismal future for Afghanistan.
Unfortunately, that's what it is.
Okay, let's move now out, let's cross the border.
But having said that, you know, there are a lot of intelligent people inside Afghanistan. They can do it, and all that they need is to get united for the peace, security, stability of their own country.
Well, maybe the fear of an implosion will
hopefully
will do.
That's another theory also,
Okay.
that would bring them together.
American equipment coming out of Afghanistan. It's got to move through the Taliban country to the Khyber Pass. And then heading for your hometown.
Yes, and then to Karachi, 1,000 miles.
Okay. Now, in order to get safe conduct for that equipment through the Taliban country, through the Khyber Pass, that's going to require what from Pakistan?
A huge big commitment from the Pakistan army.
And is that something that's doable?
Yes, for good reason. And that is, the Pakistan army has to show its real good face to United States. It has to wash all sins committed, uncommitted, you know, by the ISI, the Inter-Services Intelligence, the intelligence wing of the Pakistan military. So it is a huge, big, great opportunity for the civil, as well as more for the military than the civil.
All right. Well, let's tie this opportunity into the raid on the Bin Laden compound.
Yes.
And it appeared in the American media that the reaction of the people of Pakistan was this enormous outpouring of hatred and venom against the United States. Is the military going to be able to repair its relationship in order to provide this safe conduct?
Right. So you watched in American media only that portion.
Right, okay.
What you did not watch is the vast majority of the secular part of Pakistani society.
Now, is Pakistan a secular country?
It has never brought a religious group of people into power.
Okay, all right.
It has always been a secular party.
I told you this is going to be fascinating.
Yeah.
You know?
And so the secular part of Pakistan society, the vast majority, you know, for as much as I know, that country, vast majority, I mean, they were happy that this problem is solved. The political party, the People's Party, was happy. The head of that party, Zardari, Asif Ali Zardari, who is now the president of, was the president, is now the sitting president. There is another president also who has been elected. So that President Zardari congratulated United States over the objection of the religious classes and religious groups and religious parties. Right now,
did you say over the objection?
Right.
Okay. All right.
Right now, a political party which is called Muslim League is in power. It won massively. It big. The people support it. It's not a religious conservative group. It is Pakistani nationalist.
Okay.
It seeks the betterment of Pakistan. And if you want to realize the betterment of Pakistan, you have to work with the United States. And so that political party, which is now in power, would definitely work with the United States to make the exit easy.
So what you're saying is, despite what we saw on the media,
right,
after
that is just 10% what you saw. and the wrong side of Pakistan.
And it is going to be an opportunity that
For the civil and the military,
to provide a safe conduct.
safe conduct.
Okay. Okay.
And they can do it.
All right.
And they will do it.
So what today?
Keep in mind also that in the past 10 years, since 9/11, close to 1,500, and I'm giving you a very conservative, figure, close to 1,500 Pakistani soldiers were killed in this fight against the Taliban.
1,500.
30,000 Pakistani people have died in the fight against Taliban, which you don't hear in the American press, in American media.
Enormous sacrifice.
So, huge, big. So just as the sacrifices happening which the people of Afghanistan are paying in this war against terror, the Pakistani government is suffering the most. The Pakistan people, and the reason is simple. In Afghanistan, the population is close to about 30 or 32 million. In Pakistan, you have a population of 184 million.
Huge difference.
Huge difference.
We're back. This is Asian Review. Our program is Afghanistan and Pakistan, crisis states now dwarfed by Syria. Our special guest is Dr. Abdul-Karim Khan from Leeward Community College. Dr. Khan is not only an expert on Middle East and Islamic history, he is a Pashtun, having grown up in Peshawar, Pakistan. And at the break, Karim, we were talking about the situation on the ground in Pakistan, and I understand you have a very very positive, very optimistic view about the security envelope that will be negotiated by the Pakistani and civilian military authorities
with the United States.
With the United States,
yes,
to bring American equipment out of Afghanistan.
Yes.
And you were talking right at the break about the kind of the shift in aid that needs to take place from the United States, or shift of involvement. And
yeah,
we want to move into some other areas in the Middle East in
sure,
this conversation. So just in a short sentence or two, what is that shift? What does Pakistan really need in terms of its relationship with the United States? What's
for the past 10 years, there is a mantra in Pakistan, both from the state and the society, telling United States, do not give us aid, give us trade. And so, if this, everybody knows the the American and Pakistani relationship,
right,
going as back as 1950s, has always been much more military than civil.
Right, right.
And because of, Pakistan joined the American camp in the Cold War, to the extent that Pakistan, the first country, though in the region, non-native country, that gave United States a base, which is only 5 miles to the east of my village.
Yeah, and a lot of people,
and that is the base from where the U-2 aircraft, the spy aircraft, that was spying on Soviet Union.
This is the Gary Powers flight?
The Gary Powers flight.
Interesting.
That was shot by the Soviets, And so that flight, Gary Powers flight, went out of that Badaber base in Peshawar. And, and for how long it was working, nobody knows. But by last month, CIA, thanks to the National Archives, persistent, they got all that material about the U-2 spy system. And so it's now for public to, read, anything they want to, and especially the Gary Powers flight into. So what I'm saying, Pakistan has a long history working with the United States, but it was not a relationship between two equal partners. And Pakistan was, obviously a junior partner, but it was military to military, government to government, not people to people. And so now, with more and more democracy coming into power in Pakistan, this is the best time for the United States to help democracy in the country. And the more they help democracy in the country, because remember, United States has supported all the military dictators in Pakistan. This is the greatest tragedy of the US working with the third world countries, just like Marcos in Philippines. And all these dictators, Indonesia, Malaysia, all these dictators supported by in the Cold War. And if somebody says that was the American necessity, and I say you are hiding now behind the iron wall, the iron curtain, so don't justify that because you had to fight communism, you had to support all these dictators.
And we are
in Asia.
And we're paying the price for that now.
And of course, yes.
And
so this is the greatest chance for both, opportunity for both United States and Pakistan.
Okay, so
civil and military to work together and make this exit as peacefully as possible. It is not going to be easy though. So Taliban would definitely try to create problems.
So we have with the Taliban spanning the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Yes.
You have painted a picture of a rather potentially, no promises, a kind of a dismal future for Afghanistan.
Yes.
But on the flip side, for Pakistan, an opportunity, a very optimistic view that there's an opportunity here for the United States to really build an important trade business relationship and shift out of just the pure military aid.
Exactly.
And help strengthen a democracy in Pakistan.
And I would say with both countries, with Pakistan as well as Afghanistan, because you cannot leave Afghanistan like that.
Before we go too much further time-wise,
yes,
I'm just dying to ask you about some things that relate to how does Syria fit in with the whole situation in Afghanistan and Pakistan now? Let's put that piece of the puzzle on the table and
that is not really a big problem for both Afghanistan and Pakistan. Well, the reason is they have their own problems.
So they're consumed.
And so the Syrian thing is going on for the past 2 years.
Okay.
A civil war, basically. The Alawite Shia minority regime at the top and the Sunnis at the bottom. And so that is a sectarian warfare between the Shia and the Sunni in Syria. So both Pakistanis and Afghanis, common people, that is not really their number one or number two or number three, problem. What it is, stealing the show from Afghanistan.
Stealing the show.
From Afghanistan, where Afghanistan should be really genuinely the center of U.S. efforts.
Well, what about stealing of Taliban fighters into Syria? Is that happening?
No, I highly doubted that Taliban would leave Afghanistan at this critical juncture, because if the Taliban command and control needs any foot soldier, any commander, that has to be inside Afghanistan, and for simple reason, because they're watching the Americans leaving, and that is their opportunity to seize power.
So they don't want to let anybody go.
Exactly.
Okay. What about Al-Qaeda out of Afghanistan or Pakistan into helping in Syria?
Possible, but I believe the Al-Qaeda in Syria that is fighting in Syria, these are not Afghanis, these are not Pakistanis. Remember, there were no Afghani or Pakistani Al-Qaeda to begin with.
Really?
Yes. Al-Qaeda, these were Arabs, Arab foot soldiers that stayed with bin Laden in Afghanistan after the Soviet left and moved into Pakistan when the American came in. after 9/11.
Okay, all right.
There's no such thing as Pakistani or Afghani Al-Qaeda. These were Arabs who came from different parts of Arabia, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Egypt, up west, down west to Morocco. So there are Afghan Taliban and Pakistani Taliban, but no Afghan or Pakistani Al-Qaeda.
Okay, let's jump now into Syria.
Syria.
And
most of Al-Qaeda, if any, that would be fighting in Syria, and the administration has already, sort of confessed to it, so to speak. Yes, there are, Al-Qaeda.
It's not funny, but
yeah. but more than Americans in the Western press, it's the Syrian regime that is saying that they are fighting against Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups.
Okay, now hold on. Now let's take this whole civil war in Syria.
Yeah.
On one side, we have the
Assad regime.
Bashar regime.
Assad regime.
And they are what ethnic group?
They are Arab.
Arab?
But they are sectarian group of Shia. And among the Shia, a minor group, Alawai.
Okay, so basically they are sectarian Shia.
Right.
Now
a minority in Syria.
All right. Now
the majority is Sunni.
I want you to ignore what you've heard from administration officials and so
right.
forth. I want you to explain to the audience now, what is the rebel group? What's the other side of the aisle composed of? Is it Al-Qaeda?
It's not just only Al-Qaeda. It is basically the original group of people who fought in 1980s the father of Bashar Assad, Hafiz al-Assad. Hafiz al-Assad killed 80,000 rebels in the 80s.
Okay, so this is the younger generation that survived.
Yes, the younger generation
bloodbath.
of those, parents, so to speak, and much more radicalized now with internet and all that. And so there is a major group of people that are easily termed as the Ikhwan al-Muslimin in Syria, which were next door ruling in Egypt, that were toppled in a coup d'etat by, the Assisi group of people, the military people in Egypt, without much support, but without much condemnation of United States.
So this was the
Mubarak.
Mubarak toppling.
And the anti-Mubarak people.
Okay.
In Egypt, they are also anti-Bashar Assad in Syria. So you have that group.
Okay, so the rebel group has got some Al-Qaeda.
Some Al-Qaeda, some Ikhwan al-Muslimin, and a lot of local people.
Okay, and are there any Muslim Brotherhood in that mixture?
Oh yes, Ikhwan al-Muslimin, that's the Muslim Brotherhood. Yes, there are. No question about it. Openly. And then there are other people who even Bashar Assad had never known them in his own life. And the Syrian intelligence, they say it's a new group. And so you have groups and groups and groups, and because Syria is very much divided country. Even among the Sunnis, divided country. It has, the Kurdish population also. That's another, element disunifying the country. And you have, the Kurds, and you also have a huge, big influence of the Iranians among the Shia, the minority in Syria. You have another group of people, and that was fighting on the side of Bashar Assad, and that was Hezbollah from Lebanon. So the situation is very complex.
All right. So what we have just a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
Let me pose a question to you, and then we'll end this program with this thought.
Yeah.
What happens if the plan to launch these Tomahawk missiles, as this program is being recorded, actually happens, and there is a U.S. intervention strike in Syria? What do you see as Syria's reaction to that?
In the past 10 years, Syria has done one thing, and that was not to react. Israel attacked Syria twice,
and Syria
saying that there were nuclear installations just about to start, nuclear programs, so they attacked that. Syria did not respond, did not retaliate. Last year, Israel attacked Syria saying a convoy was going, weapons were going
remember
to Hezbollah or Hamas. Syria did not respond. Now, will Syria stay the course of not responding, so to speak, and just suffer the consequences of whatever the Tomahawk can do, destroy some buildings? And would that lead to the downfall of the regime? I doubt it. Unless and until there is a general insurrection in the country triggered by these attacks, maybe. But openly the Obama administration is saying, they are not in the business of changing the regime. So what's the use of just showing the anger? The Obama administration anger against the regime for having used the chemical weapons on its own population. If Syria responds, or if the Iranian push them into response, because this is also a very good time for the Iranian to help the Syrian against the United States.
Okay, we're just about out of time here. Let me do this in a yes or no fashion. Response from Hezbollah?
Possible.
Response from Hamas?
Possible.
Response from
unlimited base.
And a response from Iran?
Possible.
And maybe Syria responds?
Yes.
So one strike, potential four groups coming back.
Coming back to help Syria.
Karim, this has been a fascinating and fabulous conversation, and I'm sure the audience would agree with me.
Very complicated business.
Very complicated. And I would like to invite you to come back again.
No
we'll
problem.
work on some pieces of this.
Most welcome.
I think this is very helpful for our audience in trying to understand the complexities of,
Most welcome.
Let us pray that the situation in Afghanistan and Pakistan improves.
Yes.
and works out, because as you say, there's enormous investment
Yes.
by all sides in those countries, and great opportunities there in the future.
Especially for the United States.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have been watching a ThinkTech global broadcast here called Asian Review. We've been talking with Dr. Abdul-Karim Khan from Leeward Community College, and Dr. Khan, as you can tell, has enormous depth in this region of the world. We've been talking about Afghanistan and Pakistan, crisis states now dwarfed by the crisis in Syria. And we'd like to invite you to join us again.